Good afternoon, everyone. This is Oscar Chacon, the Executive Director at Alianza Americas. Welcome to this webinar where we will be exploring the significance of the announcement made last night regarding TPS for people from Nicaragua and Honduras and beyond. We are going to give a few more minutes to actually get going. So please bear with us, but we will be back with you very shortly. I will introduce our presenters and then we will get going. Just bear with us a couple of minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Oscar Chacon. Let me actually show my face so that you can see who's talking to you. Again, my name is Oscar Chacon. I'm the Executive Director with Alianza Americas. Welcome to this webinar where we will be exploring the meaning and implications of the decision announced last night by the Acting Director of the Homeland Security Department, having to do with the future of people who have been TPS recipients from Nicaragua and from Honduras. We are fortunate today to have with us a line of panelists that will allow us to dive deep into these questions and briefly at the same time. Our goal is to be done right by the hour from the beginning of this particular webinar. We have with us today in the lineup of the speakers, Daniela Burgi Palomino, who is from the Latin American Working Group and who will be speaking of efficiency in countries of origin, one of the key factors to take into account in making these decisions. Second of all, we are going to have Marlene Bastien from Haitian Women in Miami, who will also be addressing the question of Haiti. Haiti, just to clarify, was the object of the announcement made yesterday, but it is very soon coming up. The 22nd, 23rd of November is the date when that announcement should be made. Arlene will explain more to us about it. Then we will have Anu Joshi from the New York Immigration Coalition and the Fair Immigration Reform Movement. We'll be speaking with us about what are we doing in terms of trying to confront these decisions, particularly on the legislative front. Then Anu will be followed by Lilia Alvarez from CARECEN in Washington, D.C., who will speak a little bit about the legal context of all these developments, but also what may need to be done in terms of preparing for a potential worst case scenario, as it is now the case for Nicaraguans. And finally, we will be hearing from Eddie. Eddie comes to us from, I believe, Florida, if I'm not mistaken, but Eddie can correct me later on. He's the son of immigrants who are recipients of TPS from Honduras. So he will be speaking about how this decision is likely to impact his life and the life of his parents. As it is just probably known to all of you, but recap, last night in the early evening, the Department of Homeland Security announced a decision to end TPS protection for people from Nicaragua. They did so by also providing a grace period of sorts, which will keep this particular population protected through early 2019. They also announced that they were not able to make a decision in the case of Honduras. These two groups were originally part of the same TPS designation. And in the case of Honduras, the fact that they could not announce a decision immediately triggers an automatic extension of about 6 months that will keep Hondurans now scheduled to be protected through July, which were facing a potential expiration of TPS as of January of next year. And of course, I mean, notice were announced yesterday in regards to two other groups that are of great concern to us, people from Haiti and people from El Salvador. Those decisions are going to be coming up soon. we may speak a little bit about those two countries as well as we will do with Marlene. But in reality, these announcements are still coming up. Without further ado, let me actually go first with Daniela Burgui Palomino from the Latin American Working Group, who will be speaking to us about conditions in countries of origin. We have asked all the speakers to try to be as brief as they can, possibly within 5 minutes, so that we can allow more time for question and answer, and I'll explain how we will handle that when we get to that point in the webinar. Again, thank you for being here. Daniela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oscar. The organization I represent, the Latin American Working Group, or LOG, has been working for more than 30 years to ensure that U.S. policies towards the Americas are rooted in human rights and justice. And we do this with a broad coalition of organizations, many of the colleagues present on this call today, in the United States and in the region. We've taken several trips to Central America to serve on the ground the situation in terms of human rights, poverty, violence, corruption, and impunity. And as such, we're acutely aware of what the transnational impacts of ending TPS for Central Americans would be. And we can say with certainty that ending TPS would have profoundly negative consequences on the stability of the region and undermine the U.S. foreign policy and national security interests in the Northern Triangle countries. We join Oscar and our colleagues in strongly opposing yesterday's decision by DHS to end TPS for the Nicaraguan members of our communities and to leave Hondurans in a cruel uncertainty for another 6 months. Yesterday's DHS decision fails to acknowledge the situation of insecurity, corruption, and impunity in Honduras, which we as LOG have extensively documented. We actually just put out a weekly blog series called Between a Wall and a Dangerous Place, in which we look at some of these issues and basically confirm how the refugee crisis in this part of the world hasn't ended. And so even though DHS yesterday decided to keep Hondurans' lives in limbo for another 6 months, which is clearly not a way to live a life, we and our partners have documented that ending TPS would mean Hondurans would be forcibly returned to danger. In the first 6 months of 2017, there's been a 22% increase in levels of internal displacement in Honduras compared to last year. We know that gangs, organized crime, and security forces continue driving forced displacement, and internally displaced families and individuals do not have access to services usually. There are no services to deported migrants and often end up turning right back around and leaving their home. Cities where the capital of Honduras, have some of the highest homicide rates in 2016 in the world. Femicides continue unabated. Just in the first 6 months of 2017, 187 women were murdered. And by and large, the ordinary citizen doesn't have access to justice. The vast majority of crimes, such as extortion, homicides, remain in impunity. And we know that many communities have never fully recovered from Hurricane Mitch, and that the levels of poverty remain some of the highest in this part of the world, in the Western Hemisphere. So when we're talking about the potential return of up to 57,000 Hondurans who have lived and worked in the US for 20 years or more, have businesses, own homes, and multiple assets, and speak English, we're talking about a population that would return with limited family networks in the country in the face of a serious security situation, few economic opportunities, and probably displace the other hundreds of thousands of individuals that are probably be direct targets for extortion and set up another wave of displacement within the country and eventually migration to the United States. Now, the administration has talked a lot about not driving people into the hands of smugglers, but if you deport people without any sort of options in country, that is exactly what's probably going to happen. It would undermine also the over $1 billion that the United States has invested to address the root causes and to stabilize the region. So we'd really urge DHS and the State Department to really look long and hard at some of these conditions that I just mentioned, because we really think that conditions exist on the ground to merit extensions for TPS. And we've been extremely disappointed by reports that the State Department submitted a letter to DHS saying that the conditions on the ground no longer merit protections, which is completely contradictory to this humanitarian situation that we've witnessed. The decision for El Salvador, as Oscar said, was not made yesterday. It's set to be made early for January of next year for around 195,000 individuals. And in terms of El Salvador, we've really witnessed a similar situation to Honduras. With the exception, El Salvador is actually a much smaller country. And so when you're talking about elevated levels of violence, you're talking about a situation where there really is nowhere to hide, which is actually what a government official told me in August during a trip that we took. And there's no policies to provide shelter, access to services to those who are displaced. We also witnessed during the trip abuse and extrajudicial executions by the police being drivers of displacement. So again, it's not just organized crime or gangs. It's really that people have nowhere to turn from the very agents and agencies that are supposed to protect them in country. So we're not just talking about the situation of insecurity, corruption, and impunity for ordinary citizens that people will be returned to, but also we're talking about how much Salvadorans and Hondurans contribute to their weak economies with remittances. And here we know that Salvadorans back almost twice as much the total US public and private sector investments combined in 2016. And both Hondurans and Salvadorans contribute more than 17% of total GDP for both countries. So ending TPS for these countries would also be a threat to the prosperity of El Salvador and Honduras because of the money TPS recipients send back to strengthen their economies. Now, just to start wrapping up, yesterday DHS did end TPS for approximately 1,500 Nicaraguans who also contribute a lot to their economy. We know that Nicaragua doesn't currently have the levels of insecurity and violence that we see in El Salvador and Honduras, but we do know, for example, that as of 2015, 9% of the national income, in fact, depended on remittance from Nicaraguans in the US to their economy. And we do know that Nicaragua also has high levels of widespread unemployment and poverty. And so again, even the situation isn't the same as El Salvador and Honduras, returning individuals, once again, who have lived their whole lives in the US and who don't have connections with their home country, could eventually have longer-term destabilizing impacts on Nicaragua. And we also know that Nicaragua is a neighboring country of Honduras and El Salvador, that in the past few years has already actually begun to receive asylum seekers and migrants from Honduras and El Salvador. So there could be sort of after effects as well. So in conclusion, as LOG, we'd like to reiterate that yesterday's decision, to terminate TPS for Nicaraguans and to put Hondurans' lives on hold yet again. This is only the latest in this administration's string of senseless xenophobic attacks on members of our communities here and our Latin American neighbors. This will only drive families and individuals further into the shadows and into fear, and will destabilize the region in the future. We urge DHS to reconsider its decision on Nicaragua and to request 18-month extensions for the upcoming TPS renewals on Honduras, El Salvador, and Haiti for the conditions, given the conditions on the ground that I've already described and that my colleagues will describe regarding Haiti. And we urge Congress to act quickly to pass legislation to protect TPS benefits and constantly have to live in a state of limbo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniela. We are going to continue the conversation with Marlene Bastien, the Executive Director of Haitian Women in Miami, and a very long-time activist working on behalf of immigrant communities, and particularly her fellow Haitians who have been protected with TPS in Florida and beyond. So Marlene, please, the floor is yours. Oh, you need to mute yourself, Marlene.
First, we'd like to thank you, Oscar, and Alianza Americas for this invitation, and thank you everybody who's participating in this important forum today. As you know, from Haitian Miami led the previous TPS campaign several years ago. And then we are working nationally with organizations on the ground in Florida and around the nation for an 18-month extension for TPS for Haiti. Experts on Haiti from the IJDH, the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, called a report by Secretary Nelson at odds with the fact on the ground. The Washington Post, as you know, reported Friday that Secretary Tillerson sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security stating that conditions in Haiti and Central America no longer warrant temporary protected status. The fact is that Haiti still suffers from past and recent conditions warranting an 18-month extension. Less than 8 years ago, Haiti suffered one of the worst catastrophes in modern history. An earthquake that killed over 250,000 people and quasi-destroyed the entire Haiti's infrastructure. Almost 8 years later, the country still has not rebuilt, as exemplified by the most important symbol of the nation, which is the National Palace, which is still underground in Haiti. The fact that Haiti still warrants a continuation of temporary protected status has been well documented by academia, by the media, and even by the Haitian government, who recently sent an official letter to the Department of Homeland Security, Acting Secretary Elaine Duke, requesting an 18-month extension. In addition to the earthquake, Haiti on October 4th, 2016, suffered one of the worst hurricanes in its 52 years, causing 2.8 billion in damages, which constitutes 22% of Haiti's GDP. There is also in Haiti, the imported cholera epidemic, which continues to wreak havoc in the island nation. The imported cholera epidemic has killed over 8,000 people and has left 1.2 million sick. This with $400 billion to repair Haiti's infrastructure and compensate those who lost family members as a result of this imported epidemic has been unsuccessful. Even the US recently has refused to use money left over by MINESTA, which is the United Troops that recently left Haiti, toward this plan to compensate families and rebuild Haiti's water and other infrastructures. I recently was part and led of a delegation to Haiti, where we went to the border of the Dominican Republic. In Ansapitre, we also went through the entire South Peninsula. The delegation met with refugees who have been living in squalor in conditions not fit for human beings from 2013. These are mainly Dominicans, born of Haitian immigrants and sons of Haitian immigrants. Some who have lived in the Dominican Republic for 50 years, and they were deported in complete denial of their rights. And a documentary which will soon be published, which we hope also to show doing a briefing, a congressional briefing that we're working on, will show how Haiti has been unable to absorb these refugees from the Dominican Republic since who have been living there since 2013. In addition to Hurricane Matthews, in addition to the earthquake, in addition to the imported cholera epidemic, Haiti, most people are not aware, also suffered as a result of the most recent hurricanes Irma and Mary. Hurricane Matthew quasi-destroyed the entire South Peninsula, killing crops, livestock, and with hundreds reported dead. And Hurricane Irma and Mary destroyed the North End, which historically has produced most of the food in Haiti. It is expected that there will be severe food shortage in Haiti as a result of the most recent hurricanes, Irma and Mary. Deporting 58,000 people to Haiti, people who have been living here for an average of 8 to 30 years, who have grown roots, who have these roots in this community, who have US-born children, 27,000 US-born children among the 300,000 TPS recipients, who completely destabilize Haiti at a time when it needs the most help, when it's suffering from not only natural crisis, but also increased abuses. If DHS was to end TPS for Haiti, it will cause unchecked sufferings, not only from the population of TPS recipients here in the US, but also in Haiti, for those in Haiti who relied on the remittances that 2 billion actually a year that support family members in Haiti. So our recommendation is for DHS to extend TPS for 18 months for Haiti, for Salvador, for Honduras, and other nations, pending the permanent solutions to support these families' efforts to live here in respect and dignity like any human being deserve. These TPS recipients, as Americans as apple pie, they've been living here, they've been contributing to our economy. Deporting them will not be in the best interest of Haiti or the United States of America. Thank you very much again, Alianza America, for this opportunity.
Thank you for being with us, Marlene. We are grateful for your support as well. Let me take this opportunity to also say that this webinar, which was put together very much on a lightning speed basis, it's actually a collaborative effort involving FIRM, the Fed Immigration Reform Movement, Haitian Women in Miami, FAM, Make the Road, New York, Latin American Working Group, and CARECEN from Washington, D.C. Following Marlene, I'd like to invite Anu Joshi to tell us a little bit about what are we doing collectively to try to address the fact that even though we are advocating very strongly to keep TPS protections in place, we all realize that this is not the ultimate solution that this challenge presents us. The challenge in the end is how can we formalize, how can we legalize what these populations have already become, and that is permanent residents of our communities across the nation. So Anu, I'd like to invite you to please address this particular question. Thank you for being with us.
Of course. Thank you, Oscar. And thanks everyone for taking the time to get on this webinar. So as Oscar noted, while the community, including everyone on this call, has been applying immense pressure on the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, to extend TPS, so that not only not count DHS and this amendment to do the right thing, we really need Congress to act to pass a permanent legislative solution that puts TPS recipients on the road to citizenship. And so I want to quickly just cover what efforts are happening right now in Congress to reach that goal. At this point, 2 bills have been formally introduced in Congress to address the needs of TPS recipients. The first, which was weeks ago, is the Extending Status Protection for Eligible Refugees Act, or ESPERER Act, which is a bipartisan bill that was introduced by 4 representatives from Florida, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. The lead author is Representative Carlos Curbelo from the Miami area, and his fellow Republican Ileana Ros-Lehtinen joined him, along with Democrats Frederica Wilson and Alcee Hastings. And just important to note that Representative Ros-Lehtinen is also an original sponsor of the DREAM Act. The second bill was introduced last week. The American Promise Act, or the APA, was introduced by Representative Nydia Velázquez here in New York and co-sponsored by the House Democratic Caucus Chair Joe Crowley, also of New York, and Democratic Reps Ted Lieu and Karen Bass of California. It's important to note that both of these bills provide a road to legal permanent status and eventually citizenship for those who are eligible to apply under each of the bills individually. Both bills provide an extensive time period to apply, so folks would have 3 years from enactment of the bills to apply. And in both, families of applicants are also eligible to adjust their status. So that includes spouses, children, and parents of individuals who are eligible so long as they apply during that same 3-year window. Now, the biggest difference between the 2 bills is who would be eligible to apply to adjust their status under the bills. Under Curbelo's ESPERER Act, only people from the 3 Central American countries, Honduras, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, and TPS recipients from Haiti would be eligible for status adjustment. Now, what that means is that current TPS recipients from Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, Nepal, Yemen, and Somalia would not qualify under this bill. The bill also requires that anyone who applies, in addition to being a TPS recipient from one of those 4 countries, must have been physically present in the United States on January 12th, 2011. So must have had at least 6.5 years of residency. On the other hand, the American Promise Act has no country limitations. It simply requires that anyone applying be a current TPS recipient or have been eligible to apply for TPS between January 1st, 2017 and October 1st of 2017. So between January and October of this year. This would effectively mean that all current TPS recipients, including Sudan and Nicaragua, whose TPS termination has been announced but not enacted as of yet, and individuals who had TPS from 3 West African countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, that was terminated earlier this year, would all be eligible to adjust their status under this bill. Representative Yvette Clarke, also of New York, is also considering a third piece of legislation that she is hoping will also be a bipartisan effort. And while the exact details of that bill aren't public, are still unknown, we do know that she is speaking with a number of Republican offices and Democratic offices. And her goal is to craft a bill that can have broad bipartisan support in the House of Representatives. Now, there have been some efforts in the Senate, but they're nowhere near as advanced as the efforts in the House. Unfortunately, we don't yet have a bill that's been introduced in the Senate. Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado has been a champion on the Democratic side, fighting to protect TPS recipients and urging his colleagues to consider supporting a bill. And on the Republican side, Senator Marco Rubio from Florida has been very publicly supportive of protecting TPS recipients, asking the administration to extend each TPS for the countries. He's been especially active over the past 6 months, but he has not yet, at least publicly, committed to supporting a piece of legislation to provide permanent status to TPS recipients. Moving forward, it will be very important that both Republicans and Democrats hear from their constituents on the importance of Congress passing a permanent legislative solution. This is especially true in the wake of the cruel and unjust decisions by the administration yesterday in regards to Nicaragua and Honduras, and what we are anticipating for Haiti in the coming weeks. So I just really encourage everyone on this call, please call your senators, ask them to sponsor legislation. Call your representative and ask them to either support legislation that's already been introduced in the House, or reach out to Representative Yvette Clarke's office and inquire about co-sponsoring her legislation. And there's actually a toll-free number that you can call to be connected to your members of Congress. That number is 1-844-817-8056. And if you call that number, I'm going to say it one more time, 844-817-8056, you will be given a script and then automatically connected to your member of Congress. So thank you so much, Oscar, for inviting me to be a part of this call. I look forward to questions, and I just really encourage everyone to please raise the pressure on your elected representatives. They need to know that the community is watching, and we demand a permanent legislative solution.
Thank you very much, Anu. And let me just also say that above and beyond those of you in this particular webinar, think of people you may know in states, particularly the states where there may be populations that are by TPS that happen to be actually Republican-dominated states, because it is absolutely crucial that we also persuade members of the Republican Party to understand the wisdom of actually providing a solution to the fact that so many people have been in this country for so long, following all the rules and requirements that they were required to fulfill, and yet, they remain in this condition of high vulnerability, as proven already by the TPS programs that have ended just in the course of this year, the most recent of them the case of Nicaraguans. With that said, let me invite Lilia Alvarez. She is the Legal Program Director at CARECEN in Washington, D.C., to also contribute to the conversation by addressing the question of what are communities to do precisely when they come to the point that Nicaraguans and Sudanese have already faced in terms of seeing their programs coming to an end. Lilia, we are very happy to have you with us. And let me make sure that you are unmuted because, okay, I think you are still muted, Lilia. There you go. Are you there, Lilia? Hello, Lilia.
Oscar, thank you. I'm in. I'm able
Okay,
to
great. Thank
now.
you. Okay, good.
Thank you. Excellent. But I've been on the call listening. We just had to deal with some technical difficulties. Everybody, I'm here on the top. Just what are we doing legally as far as the strategy to look to the future and make sure that we provide hope as far as a legal defense strategy to ensure that people have information, appropriate information, competent information about legal relief, immigration legal relief available to them. Specifically, our strategy revolves around making sure that everyone knows this is the time to be screened for relief, to not leave it, for another day. Also, we are going to be really stressing potential of an affirmative asylum just like process, engaging people in the understanding of what that entails, maybe for other forms of relief, but if they are not, then we will be screening people as the last resort for affirmative asylum. And also we're incorporating just the understanding that people have holistic needs around their TPS status. It isn't only immigration that they are concerned about. So as CARECEN, we are also looking at partnerships with legal professionals or just community service professionals that can safeguard people's rights as far as assets, family rights, and sort of like the whole gamut as to concerns that they may have. We're beginning to get calls of people just asking us for advice on what's the best thing to do with their bank accounts, with their properties, with their minor children who are in school, and so forth. We also are partnering with other legal professionals around this, the understanding that while the executive branch can take this type of action, the courts may be the only recourse we end up having as far as making sure there's a check on the executive branch. So we're partnering with pro bono attorneys that have the expertise as far as appellate work, and also sort of any kind of recourse that can be had at in the state courts or in district courts, so that we don't just remain at the trial level in immigration. That's in a nutshell right now. Oscar, please advise if you need me to go into any more detail.
No, I think that for now, that's good enough. I apparently, I didn't hear you. I mean, I heard you clear and loud, but apparently some of the attendees were having a difficulty listening very well to what you were saying, but we will come back to you in the Q&A section. Let me move to the last speaker in this lineup, but definitely not the least speaker in the lineup. I want to mention that there are about 250,000 children born in the U.S. of parents that are recipients. There are also a very large number of kids that were brought by their parents who were TPS recipients. Today, Eddie is with us. Eddie is actually from the New York City area. My apologies earlier for saying you were from Florida. So I'd like to ask you, please address from your point of view, what are going to be the consequences of seeing your parents potentially losing very tenuous immigration status they have had via TPS?
Again, my name's Eddie Monroy. From the New York City area. Actually grew up and was born and grew up in the Hudson Valley, New York, which is 90 minutes north of New York City. Today, I reside and I also work in Connecticut, Stamford, Connecticut. So I am a new resident as of 2 years ago, resident of Connecticut in Fairfield County. Thank you for the question. Thank you for Alianza America to give me an opportunity to have a voice to speak about this topic that I've lived with my entire life. Today, I kind of come from two different sides. I'm a U.S.-born citizen of two TPS holders. My mother and my father both came from Honduras. They actually did not know each other. They actually met here. Funny story is that my dad was one of the first few people of Central America to be in Newburgh, New York, and he had a friend followed him from Texas to Newburgh, who knew my mother, and asked if he could tag along to pick up my mom from the airport. Long story short, you fast forward almost 30 years later, and they're now married. I was born in Newburgh, grew up not knowing much about immigration or people of different color, not knowing different differences. As I got older, my parents started explaining a little bit more about what TPS was and what their situation was. When I recall when I was in middle school, my parents were really concerned what was going to be their next move at their structure in life. We had just bought a house. My parents bought 2 new vehicles. Dad actually got a new job. My dad works construction to the day. Mom works, they're both blue-collar workers. My mom works at a warehouse at a major corporation, top 500 corporation. She's actually a supervisor, in which she has benefits. She has full retirement plans. She has company assistance in terms of Fortune 500 benefits. And my dad, coming from a line of small business and family-owned construction families, doesn't necessarily have those benefits. You fast forward and you ask the question, what's going to happen to you and your family? We're actually at the stage where I've had to really figure it out and figure a lot out in the last almost 3 months now. What I mean by that is my parents had 2 children here. Myself, I was the eldest, and my little sister, who passed away at 18, just back in July. She was involved in a car accident in which an intoxicated driver took his life and her life. We've had to figure out burial services just within 24 hours. The accident actually occurred in upstate New York. In the county where it occurred, they're deeming it one of the worst, if not the worst, vehicle accident and their history because of the rate of speed that was involved, in which I unfortunately cannot go into details. The case is still pending. We don't know much information other than the driver and her passed away, and that there was an excessive rate of speed, and that there was alcohol involved. My parents right now are the heirs of her estate. She was going through university, and we've had to figure out what happens to her belongings, what are other parameters that we take on as a family, as we try to kind of gather ourselves together. And then you sprinkle on this TPS situation that we're facing, in which we don't know what will happen to them. Fortunately enough, I'm at the standpoint where I can help them both economically to a standpoint, and also within a immigration legal matter. I am older than 21. What I've been mentioning to a lot of leaders talking about this topic, I feel at this point I'm at a race against time. Not knowing what's going to happen with TPS, trying to get our case heard in front of an immigration judge. As you folks might know or might not know, take anything from 3 months to 6 months. And that's just for one individual. Here we're talking about two, my mother and my father. So, you know, what trying to figure out is a lot. The last few weeks, we've been trying to figure out my parents' retirement planning after the whole situation with my sister, what happens in terms of life insurance. We've had to figure out what happens to the house. My parents are property owners. They have been property owners for over 20 years. They've been in this country for more than 2 decades. They've actually had a great story where the city, small city where my parents are from, has a population of about 30,000 individuals. The impact that my parents have had, not just with the Latino community, but the community at large, in which they have been rooted in, have had the opportunity to learn English, have had social mobility. My dad being an individual that's helped start many divisions at different family-owned businesses for contracting companies. Just to speak alone about that, about their impact in their community, we saw it full in force this summer, in which there's 30,000 people in that population, and we had just about a little over 1,300 people come out to my sister's services just to pay their respects. It's been truly amazing to see a lot of people that my parents and even my sister, just had one conversation or 2 conversations, and seeing those people come out of the woodworks, it's been incredible. So in terms of, what happens to them, what do we do here moving forward? I feel there's a lot of moving pieces we're trying to handle, from a legal stand case, from my sister's passing, to, emotional state with us, to immigration, to their retirement planning. They've actually been in this country, are rooted into this country, and they see themselves as Americans. They've lived in America longer than they've lived in their birth nation of Honduras. And they do see themselves as part of this community. Until recently, I really didn't know what it was to live in limbo. And, trying to grasp all that information now and having a deeper understanding of what my parents have lived through, this is not a very healthy way to be living in. It's constant stress. You try to put one foot forward, and you try to invest as much as possible in a culture economically, and you just don't know. My parents are probably one of those rare cases in which they dumped everything into this country, with the hope that this country might open its doors to them one day. We could bring it back a little bit to from 2009. My parents were involved, another horrific accident in which my dad and my mother were both out of work. 2009 happens, construction obviously plummets. My dad loses his job. Thank goodness for my mom's benefits at her job, where we were able to weather the storm, but we were inches away from losing the house. And my parents actually had to double down and basically start the clock over and refinance the house. And that's essentially what our situation has been has been. My parents have doubled down into this country. They're rooted into this community. And I know I'm not the only child of a TPS benefit out there. There's a lot of us out there. Me, myself, because of my parents' efforts, I was able to finish undergraduate and graduate school. I have an MBA in just 4 years. And my sister is actually on track on finishing her undergraduate degree in 3 years. So there's many individuals like me out there, and I'm nothing special. And I really want Congress and political officials and leaders in this country to understand that these are human beings that have been rooted in these communities, and at least coming from a standpoint of where I'm coming from.
Oh, I'm afraid that we actually lost Eddie. His image has frozen. Hopefully we'll get him back. Thank you very much, Eddie, for sharing all that information. I think that the case Eddie has illustrated for us in his own experience is actually a case that we can multiply many, many times to actually see why we are advocating as strongly as we can to be able to find a solution to the case of people who happen to be TPS recipients. It's absolutely correct in pointing out that these are hundreds of thousands of people who find themselves in similar situations as his parents and his own experience. Hopefully we're gonna get Eddie back for the Q&A portion. I realize that we are already running a bit late, but let me suggest that the best way to ask questions is using the Q&A feature in the platform that Zoom offers. Another way to actually send questions is by texting them to area code 312-351-3890. Let me repeat that, 312-351-3890. So in addition to sending questions via the Q&A feature, you can also text questions there to that number, and we will be happy to do the best we can to answer. I don't see any questions in the Q&A board at this point. I invite you to use that feature in the Zoom utility. But in the meantime, let me also say that this is webinar 1 of 2 that we are doing today. We are actually doing a webinar in the afternoon. It's going to be exclusively in Spanish, simply because we realize that there is a lot of people in Latin American immigrant communities that are going to have a lot of questions regarding what does the announcement mean. So again, in case you are wondering, we are doing that webinar at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and the corresponding times in the other time zones in the country. So I don't see any questions coming through. I don't know if there is any question in the text message number that we just provided. If there isn't any, okay, he's back. Okay, very good. Thank you again, Eddie. You didn't hear me say, but I just wanted to thank you for sharing with us. There is a lot clearly that you have to share. Hopefully there may be some questions coming your way. Again, I don't see any questions. Maybe a good time. Maybe you all are so well understood about TPS, and that would be great. We would hope to get you to become advocates on these issues. Okay, there is one question. What can non-TPS holders do to support this community? That's a great question because indeed we need everyone's help on this particular task. So I don't know if any one of you, the speakers, Marlene, Anu, Daniela, Eddie, would like to answer this question. Remember that you may be muted if you are trying to answer. Unmute yourself. Anybody? Oh, I think Marlene is trying to answer, but she's muted. Let me see if I can unmute. Go ahead, Marlene.
So thank you so much for this question. We at FAM, we've been advising our members and supporters to reach out to their representatives in their respective states, and then ask them to support a permanent solution for TPS holders, the 320,000 plus TPS holders. They can also participate in our Twitter rallies, or local and national rallies right now. Congresswoman Frederica Wilson is spearheading a Twitter rally, #SaveTPS. You can type Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, you can partake in that. There will be more Twitter rallies next week. We have one scheduled, we at FAM, we have one scheduled for Monday. The other thing you can do, you can address, and this is also recommended by Congresswoman Frederica Wilson and others, focus on Acting Secretary Elaine Duke. I believe there are a couple of numbers. Joel, if you could get that before the end of the webinar, we can share it. Call, or you can Google this information. Call Secretary Elaine Duke and ask her to extend TPS for 18 months to give Congress a chance to act, to find a permanent solution, hopefully so that these TPS families can get permanent residency down the line, trailblazing a path to citizenship. So there is a lot you can do. And then if you're not sure, if you got all this information, you're not sure, contact organizations you know in your state are working for TPS renewal or are working on immigrants' rights in renewal.
Yeah, let me emphasize that very point. The organizations that are coming together, organizing these activities are a good source of information in case you want to become more active on helping TPS recipients get justice. We at Alianza Americas have been working hard at this from the beginning of the year and working very closely with every one of the partners in this particular call. So I just want to echo what Marlene was saying. Absolutely reach out to us in case you don't know what to do. We will be more than happy to share ideas that help in terms of what can be done. Are there any other questions that may have come in? Let me check in the Q&A part. There isn't any. Well, I mean, if there are no questions, that may be a good sign. I do want to emphasize the importance of reaching out to organizations you know, so that there can be action on your part. It is about 4 minutes before the hour from the moment that we convene this particular webinar. There are no more calls. I would just like to say thank you to everyone who took time to attend this particular informational webinar. We will be in touch with you in order to keep you posted on new developments. As I mentioned earlier, the date for Haiti TPS decision is coming up, and we are going to be working as hard as we can so that that decision is a positive one. And then later on, there is also the case of El Salvador, which is also coming up towards the end of the year. So we want to make sure to also keep the pressure up. And again, thank every one of the panelists for having taken time to be with us. Daniela, of course, Marlene, Eddie, Anu, Lilia. Thank you again for taking the time from your busy schedules to be with us this afternoon. Thank you again, and I believe that's all there is for today. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Merci.
Merci.
Thank you, Oscar.
De nada.
Adios.
Adios.
I think it was very good.